Welcome back to Bible Shorts, episode 52, A Last Stand on Mount Gilboa. Well, remember in our last episode, we learned how the Philistine army had gathered to battle the army of Saul and the Israelites. But luckily, King Achish of Gath had sent David and his men away, so David did not have to fight Saul or his fellow Israelites. Phew! Right? Then the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and many fell on Mount Gilboa in northern Israel. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and 2 other sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard on Saul, and the archers of the Philistines found him, and he was badly wounded. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, so the Philistines may not come and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer was unwilling, for he was terrified. Many of the men of Israel fled from the army. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. And Saul and 3 of his sons and all his men who stayed with him died together on the same day. Meanwhile, David, his men, and their families were in a city called Ziklag, way south of Mount Gilboa, on the fringes of the country of the Philistines. On the 3rd day after the battle, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground and did obeisance. David said to him, "Where have you come from?" And he said, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." And David asked, "How did things go? Tell me." The young man answered, "The army fled from the battle, but also many of the army fell and died, as did Saul and his son Jonathan." And then David asked, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" The young man said, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, wounded, while the chariots and the horsemen drew close to him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me. Saul said to me, 'Come, stand over me and kill me, for convulsions have seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood over him and killed him, for I knew that he could not live once he had fallen. I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and I have brought them here to you, my lord." David was horrified and said, "How did you raise your hand against the Lord's anointed?" And David now knows Saul has indeed died, along with Jonathan, and he and all his men tear their clothes. That's a sign of mourning. And they wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for his son Jonathan and for the army of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had been struck down by the sword of the Philistines. David sang a sad song for Saul and his son Jonathan, and is called the Song of the Bow. Your glory, O Israel, lies slain upon your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Askelon, or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor bounteous fields. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, anointed with oil no more. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go back to Judah?" And he probably did this by asking the high priest Abiathar to throw lots and basically ask a question, yes or no, and until you got the answer. Unless you had a voice from God in a dream or a prophet had received a message from God, you had to throw lots. So the Lord said, "Go up." And David said, "Where should I go up?" And the lots said, "To Hebron." So David left Ziklag with his 2 wives, all the men who were with him, everyone with his household, and they settled around the town of Hebron, which you may remember was the burial place of the 3 great ancestors of the Hebrews, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then the people in southern Israel came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over them. But he's not anointed king over the whole country, but just the surrounding area, which was called Judah. Then Abner, son of Ner, a cousin of Saul, who was also the commander of Saul's army, found a surviving son of Saul called Ishbosheth and fled across the Jordan River with him to a walled city called Mahanaim, and had Ishbosheth crowned king. So now what? There's 2 kings, David in Judah in the south, and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, in the north. Well, what's going to happen next? 2 kings. This is not going to end well, is it? Look for Bible Shorts, episode 53, Jerusalem, O Jerusalem.